Good evening. I'd like to call this October 10th, 2017 regular Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. It is 6:33. Ms. Debbie, if we could get a roll call.
Oppel.
Here.
Robinson.
Here.
Blok. Here. Ellison.
Present.
Kay.
Present.
Koch.
Here.
Fenety.
Here.
All right, thank you, Debbie. All right. This is everyone's favorite part of the meeting, citizen comments period. We have a little bit lighter crowd than usual, so it's a joke. Thank you all for coming out tonight. We have the citizen comments period. I will state that there are a number of items that have a public hearing. So if you wish to speak on an item with a public hearing, we do have agendas. I believe we might still have some over at the table there. But if you see an item with a public hearing, I would like for you to hold your comments to that part of the agenda and speak at that time. Please fill out a public comments form for us as well. And we'll ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes, whether it's during citizen comments period or during the public hearing on a specific item. So with that being said, I do have a number of public comment forms.
Mr. Chairman, may I be afforded a few minutes of personal privilege time before we begin citizen comments?
Do you have any objection to that?
I just want to caution anybody who's here to speak either during citizen comments or during the public hearing on agenda item 5A, that for 8 years of my life I lived in a trailer park in 4 different parts of the country, one in Central Florida, one in Northern California, one on the outskirts of New Orleans, and one in Houston, Texas. And I know firsthand about the fine people, the great neighbors, the neighbors that will go out of their way to help another neighbor who live in trailer parks. So anybody that's coming here tonight to make disparaging comments about those people who live in trailer park are going to achieve exactly the opposite reaction that they intend to achieve. Now, I know the Constitution gives you the God-given right to exercise free speech, and you have the right to stand up here and make bigoted remarks like that. But it will do more to demean you in my eyes than to convince me of anything. Also, if anybody comes here to claim anything about crime or crime levels in trailer park, I will insist they present documented proof of those claims. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me that moment.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Oppel. And we always, as he stated, and I want to reiterate, the right for free speech. Thank you, Mr. Oppel. Next item on the agenda is zoning item 5A. This item is to consider a request by Dena Campbell, 13.81 acres, and Debra Shea Green, 11.91 acres, to assign original zoning to a combined total of approximately 25.72 acres of land from agricultural AG to recreational vehicle RV for properties located at 1942 Dacy Lane and 2000 Dacy Lane. This item does have a public hearing. I do have a few public comments. Once again, I will please ask that you respect the 3-minute time frame. I will have the alarm go off at the 3-minute mark. I will also, as a courtesy, let you know by simply stating 30 seconds that you have 30 seconds left in your 3-minute time period as a courtesy, so that you know that you probably should start wrapping it up. All right? Sound good? Great. All righty. So let's get going. The first one I have here is for, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time on the names. I'm just going to blame it on the handwriting. Just kidding. All right. There it is. Catherine Saldivar. Is there a Catherine Saldivar? We have someone going once, going twice. Sold for Catherine Saldivar. All right. All right, it was a written against registering but not testifying. All righty. We also have Antonio Villarreal. This one's registering position but not testifying against.
Mr. Chairman, these are all for 5A, correct?
Yes.
Okay, just checking.
Yep. All righty. Next, we have, this is actually an oral one against Jay Chihal. You can definitely correct me when you get to the podium, sir. Please state your name for the record.
It's Jay Chahal. You actually did pretty good.
All right.
It's better than most. Guys, I'm just going to speak informally. There's a lot of us here from Kensington Trails, and I have a feeling I know which way we're all kind of going on this, and it's probably not a surprise to you guys either. I'm going to speak informally. I didn't make a big speech or anything like that. I just got a few bullet points. There's a few items, obviously, that has to do with this whole RV park right next to our neighborhood. Pollution, reduction of foliage, increased traffic, placement, being it's near a floodplain, and obviously our property values, which we work so hard for to get our houses and start our families and whatever. We work so hard, and we want that to be increasing, not decreasing. Generally, having an RV park near our neighborhood, it will definitely, it'll decrease values. I mean, I implore you to do your research, check it out, go look around. You know, any neighborhood like ours is going to have a decreased value. You're going to have, and no offense, sir, but you have people who are going to be nomadic by nature. It's an RV park. They're going to be coming in. They have no real, what's the word I'm looking for? They have no real connection to the city. They have no real connection to the land. They're not really going to care too much. It's an RV park.
Sir, I take that as a personal attack on me, on my
Commissioner
family,
Oppel.
and
Commissioner
everything.
Oppel, please. Commissioner Oppel.
Sir,
All right.
please, out of respect,
Order.
I
All right,
please ask that you.
All right, order here. Commissioner Oppel, if you would like to excuse yourself, you may, but we must afford this man his opportunity to speak.
I appreciate.
I'll give you an extra 30 seconds.
I appreciate it. Hopefully, I don't think I'll need it, but you get people coming in. They have no connection to the land. They're obviously going to be. I mean, there's going to be pollution involved. It's supposedly near a soil conservation area. You're not really helping the soil conservation area by developing land that close to it. For whatever reason, Kensington Trails was put where it was, and you know it is what it is at this point. So let's just do what we can to try and save what we can save. Generally, also, if you look at the topography of the area, it almost makes a valley into that area. The proposed area is kind of the top of one hill. We're kind of at the top of another hill. That noise will travel. It'll travel far. And our quiet neighborhood will not be quiet any longer. It's just, you know, it is going to be what it is. We already faced the issues with, fireworks at 4th of July, New Year's, and all other stuff. This is just going to amplify that even more. The impact of the land, the local wildlife displacement, Other issues, it's it's kind of one of those things, we already have.
You have 30 seconds.
All right. Yeah, we, basically our property values, I really wanted to make a big point about, because, there's not, on the east side of 35, there's only a handful of really nice neighborhoods, I came from San Antonio, looked around, found a neighborhood I liked, and I just don't want to see it go down, just straight up.
Thank you, sir, and I
Thanks,
apologize
guys.
for the interruption.
All good.
All right. Absolutely, I'll take it. Thank you, sir. Thank you. All righty. Next in line, we have Julia Black, oral testimony.
Julia Black, live in Kensington Trails, and I'm also a realtor. I'm not here to talk bad about RV parks, but I am here to talk about what I think a lot of people would like to know is what are our property values actually doing? And please forgive me, I'm not accustomed to public speaking and a little nervous, so I'll do my best. 2015 is where I went back to. An average of 44 homes sold in our subdivision at a sales price of $185,968. They sat on the market approximately 58 days. Following year, 2016, we started seeing some activity as far as an apartment complex going up, as well as the potential expansion for the mobile home park that is across from our subdivision. Actually, I think the apartment complex started in more than 2017, but we were seeing that. Well, from 2015 to 2016, we actually saw a 14% increase in sales, where the values went up on average to $212,000, and 59 homes had sold. Pretty good year, I'd say, for Kensington Trails in 2016. Here we are in 2017. The year is not over yet. A total of 41 homes have sold as of today. The average sales price for a home is actually down to $208,713. That is a 1.6% decrease in our home values. Statistically, I don't know if that has anything to do with the apartment complex and the mobile home that has come in across the street from us, but something has definitely affected our home values, where, like the last gentleman mentioned, that we do feel very proud of our neighborhood as being one of the better ones on the east side of the 35. As of right now, there are 20 active homes, 7 are under contract, so that's 48 potential more sales that could happen before the end of the year. We can clearly see that there is something going on here with our property values, and I think as a whole entire group, most everybody's going to speak against this, because we are worried about our home values, and the numbers are already speaking for themselves. I don't know that we need any more statistics to show, because the numbers show. I will be honest, these can be a little bit off, because Texas is a non-disclosure state, and unless somebody actually put these in the MLS, which just came from the Austin board, I'm sorry, the Austin MLS, that information could be a little bit skewed if there was somebody that decided to not disclose what their home sold for. That's it. Would you like to have the copies of this?
If taken, sure. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Next in line. This one is a written against Andrew Cook, and we do have that statement here, we will have that for the complete public record. John Galaviz, also written against. Dimitri Hobbs, I have you against, but are you, all right, please step forward and state your name for the record.
Dimitri Hobbs, and I am the president of the HOA at Kensington Trails. And my wife and I both grew up in trailer parks for the first probably 10 years of our life, so we know what it's like. Crime statistics, I'm also a police officer for the city of Austin. Been there for about almost 13 years as an officer. I work the beat, I work patrol, even though my wife gives me a hard time every day and says I need to get off the street. I still catch 15-year-olds for stealing cars and breaking into houses, and I love to do that. Crime statistics are higher in RV parks because, like another person spoke before, you don't take, it's not your home. This is temporary. You're not taking pride in your city. Not everyone's that way. I can't judge everyone. Only God's the judge of everyone. But crime is higher. I have 3 in my district that I work. I work in Dove Springs. I work southeast Austin, one of the highest crime areas in the city. And we get more calls there than we do anywhere else. I have 3 of them. We have a lot more transient type people coming in, and when they can't afford their homes or apartments, they come into there. That's not all of them. I can't say that for everyone. But we see this quite often. You have your sex offenders coming in there. There's more of them coming in there because they can't get into an apartment, they can't get into a house, so they go this route. Myself and the board has worked very, very hard. We just had a pool put in for our community. We're trying to keep the values up. Like Ms. Black said, we're trying to keep those values up and keep we've got a community. We had National Night Out. People on the west side, they canceled. They're scared of the rain. Kensington Trails wasn't scared of the rain. We had barbecue and the firefighters, EMS, and police came out. And they spoke to us, they ate, our people came out, they talked to each other. We want our community to be safe and know everyone. Everybody should know your neighbor and have fun with them, and that's what we're there for. Dex, I've met you before, when you were running before, and we'll talk again. Each and every one of you, this is my community as well as it is yours, because this is the city of Kyle, okay? And I moved out of Austin because Austin's way too expensive. And most cops don't like to live where we take people to jail either. So that's another thing we don't like to do. And that's why we move out of the city of Austin. And I just pray that you give this consideration, the right consideration, and take it to your hearts and think about what everybody's saying and not just a rush to judgment. And like I said, I grew up in the first 10 years of my life. So did my wife. I don't want to go back. Nothing against it. I lived in Florida, and Florida has a lot of them, and they have a lot of problems there with them too. But just think with your hearts and make the decision wisely. And I thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Hobbs. All right. Yes, thank you. Thank you, sir. All right, next in line, we have Ms. Lori Huey, an oral statement here against. Will you please state your name for the record?
Hi, I'm Lori Huey with Kensington Trails. This property has been prone to flooding for the past 2 years. It's flooded by the bridge area, so there's been cases where there's been vehicles trapped on the bridge. So if you're having trailer RVs in there, it's a big safety hazard for the people that's camping out. Also, too, where the property is located, you're coming down around the turn. For somebody to make a turn with a camper, the location where it's at, it's not a good location. Most RVs are located off of access roads where there's long strips of roadway so they can turn. Right down the street is elementary school at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. A lot of times you have cars that already are all lined up. So traffic-wise, it's not a good place to put an RV park. Noise is also a concern. I've lived in the community since it started in 2003, and most of my neighbors in the community have always been happy because it's a nice, quiet community. I'm also a realtor, and I've sold several houses in my community, and people liked our community because it was well kept, and people took pride in our community. Another negative about RV park is the transient traffic that comes to RV parks. A lot of times they don't do background checks. So somebody who can't get typical housing due to drug violations or if they were a sexual offender, those type of people may be coming to live in RVs because some RVs will let them do month to month. And so we see that as a safety concern when kids are coming out of school, if somebody might be to start targeting our kids walking in the neighborhood. So also too, we're concerned about when people are looking to purchase houses, they look at what's around the neighborhood, and a lot of potential buyers may see RV park as a negative when they're making a decision on purchasing a home. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hugh. Good timing. All right, I'm going to go through, and there are a number here that have just written against here, so I want to state those names for the record. Once again, forgive me if I butcher the names. Phyllis Mundahl, written testimony against. Mr. Michael Smith, registering position but not testifying in against. Kayla Smith, registering position against but not testifying. Chris Gillis, registering position but not testifying against. Thank you. Okay, thank you. All right, I mentioned Chris Gillis, registering position but against. Joseph Burris, registering position against. Donald Silvas, registering position against. All right, the next three will be oral testimony. Next person in line here is Mr. Dan Ryan.
Dan Ryan, Kyle, Texas. I live in Kensington, and I'm in favor of the RV park. And the reason I am is because it's an upgrade. It's not the RV park that you think it is, and I have been Danny Green's neighbor for 17 years. When you drive by Danny Green's place, it looks like a golf course. Mine on the other side doesn't. You'll be able to tell. And I think that he's going to, as a small owner and operator, that he deserves a chance to use his land that way. The rigs that he's talking about are for retired military. They run from $130,000 to $300,000, and they're pads, and there will be no buildings built on the floodplain. And the reason he needs to have it changed to RV is so he can go to the bank and get money to explore the next session. That's as simple as that. So I'm in favor of it. And I have nothing but good things to say about the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. All right, next in line we have Mr. George Nguyen. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening. My name is George Nguyen. I'm from Kensington Trails as well. And I would just like to start by saying that I don't know what y'all's protocol is for your members to walk out when they hear opposing views, but I would ask y'all to reevaluate your liberties in letting each other speak freely if it sets the stage for all we want is to have our voice heard. Nobody wants to go against the grain. Nobody's trying to degrade anybody. But the reason that we can't find statistics on this stuff to present to you is because these RV parks are nomadic in nature. They are. It's short-term, temporary housing, low-income people that come and go. They don't plug into the cities and communities. Some of them don't register a mailbox. They don't receive mail. They don't register to vote. They don't really have a voice in our community. And that's why we don't want them representing us. You guys are not going to make any of your tax fees or any of that from that situation as well. And I would just also ask that if Mr. Oppel wants to opt out of the conversation, that he opt out of it all the way to the conclusion of the hearing. Thank you.
All right. I'm showing one last oral testimony. Please, though, if anyone else is wishing to speak, please bring your public comment form forward. We have Ms. Tobias.
Won't take too much of your time. I'm just concerned about the possibility of y'all voting or recommending, because I believe you're just an advisory board, perhaps that you would just recommend that this RV park process takes place and continue on. I am concerned about the traffic. I have family members living there. I'm concerned about having that type of business so close to the schools where my grandchildren attend school. So I would really, really like to ask you to please reconsider or consider it and take all of the comments that the people before have said and weigh it out, what is in the best interest of everything. Obviously, the prices of homes will go down, and someone has already spoke to that, and that is a concern to me also. Thank you.
If you just state your name for the record for us.
Yes, I'm Angelita Tobias.
Thank you. Yes, sir. As long as you fill out a form before you leave, absolutely. By all means. We just need that for the record for staff. You can do it afterwards. You can do it afterwards. If you'd like to speak, there's no one else on this item, so you would be next. Just make sure you do your homework before you leave. Thank you, sir.
Yes, my name is Danny Green.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Green, I apologize.
Is this the...
Mr. Green is actually the applicant.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I did not realize that.
I was going to explain that.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, we will actually give you a moment to speak, but we're going to continue with the the public hearing first, and then we'll get the comments from the applicant, and we'll get the comments from staff.
Oh, you want me to wait a minute?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. My apologies. All right. Anyone else wishing? Yes, sir.
You called my name already, but I wasn't sure if I actually filled out the form correctly.
What was the name?
Antonio Villarreal.
Okay, I have you against registering position but not testifying.
Okay, I'm not sure.
Okay. Did you want to testify?
Sure, if I'm allowed to, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Antonio Villarreal. I live in Kensington Trails. I just wanted to say that I have lived for the majority of my younger life in mobile home parks, various. I'm only 36 years old, so I want to say maybe 16 years of my life, easy.
Sorry.
That's no problem. I wanted to say that if Mr. Oppel had stayed here, he would have heard our president from the HOA give his testimony as far as crime rates that he was requesting. I do not like that he took off, just for the purpose that he could have heard his requests firsthand out of the person that would probably tell you the best. A police officer. Secondly, having lived in mobile homes, I am aware of all the crime that can happen, not that does, but it's just not something that I wish to put my own daughters through, for having lived through it. And I just want to say again that I am against this, and there's nothing against those people that we don't know, but I just don't want it around my family, and I'm sure all these people here would understand that. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Villarreal. All right. Anyone else wishing to speak on agenda item 5A? Please step forward. All right. If there is no one else wishing to speak on agenda item 5A, I'm going to close the public hearing if there's no objection from the commission. All right. Going to close the public hearing for agenda item 5A. Next, we will bring up the applicant, and then we will bring up city staff, and then we'll have discussion from the commission. I just wanted to state that public hearing part was the time for us to hear from you all. All right. Next, we will bring up the applicant. If you'll state your name for the record.
Yes. Yes, my name is Dena Green. I am the father of Dena Campbell and Debra Green Hanby. I'd like to address the committee on our application for the zoning change. First of all, we're proposing to put in an RV resort, not a park. No permanent housing. It'll be people coming in from out of town, even local residents, using the park, coming and going, no permanent housing. The pricing on the pads will be to the extreme where there won't be no low-end housing, no permanent residents, no families. They will be strictly against the rules. First, we are aware completely of the flooding issues on our property, as we have owned and resided on the property for over 20 years. We previously had 3 meetings with the P&Z staff members. In 2 of the meetings, we explained in depth that we will reclaim approximately 5 acres in the southwest portion of the property by excavation of fill dirt from the backside of our property in the floodplain, bringing the 5 acres completely 100% out of the 100-year floodplain. This would be phase 1, creating approximately 50 to 55 RV spaces with complete access to Dacy Lane in any weather condition. We have a written agreement with Plum Creek Conservation District that allows us to do this above. This proposal was not even addressed in a staff recommendation to the committee. Phase 2 would be constructing some RV pads in the floodplain that will be rented only on a short-term basis, overnights, weekends, etc. There will be a second entryway to these sites that lies in the upper south of the floodplain. They would be compromised only in an extreme event. We will have a mandatory evacuation of all renters under any possible flooding event. This will be monitored and enforced by management who will reside on the property 24/7. The exit to Dacy Lane again would be compromised only in extreme flooding and monitored by management, and it would take quite some time for the water to rise to this elevation, allowing ample time for excavation from both entries. We are completely aware that we will have to connect to the city sewer. To do so, we will have to install a lift station, installed and maintained at our expense. This is the only current option because of the elevation of the property and the existing city sewer mains, which are within a reasonable distance. We will work with our engineers in the city to a feasible solution. There are hundreds of properties in Texas and elsewhere currently using lift stations under similar circumstances. As you are probably aware, there are hundreds of RV parks and resorts in Texas and throughout the entire U.S. on lakes, rivers, coastal areas, etc., that lie in floodplain areas. In fact, even in Hays County, one recently constructed, operating near Needwall, in which is adjacent to a Plum Creek District reservoir exactly similar to ours, in which a large portion of the RV pads, some right on the water, lie within a 100-year floodplain, with only one exit to Highway 21 from the park. Using this to address the concerns of the Hays County EMS and Fire Department, how could the concerns for possible bodily injury or loss of life be any greater on our project than there or any other park in similar circumstances? We would have 2 exit points compared to 1 and 24/7 monitoring of any adverse weather conditions. As far as stated from the P&Z staff that there has never been approval of construction of any structures in the floodplain, we are not. Only concrete parking pads like in parks in the floodplain and other areas throughout. Concerns over the drainage because of the sloping terrain of the property, this shouldn't be a great issue, but we will work with our engineers and city engineers to remedy any drainage problems. Taking Lot 1, which fronts Dacy Lane, with no improvements except for a metal shed. The valuation, after annexation, the valuation went from $48,770 with taxes annually of $1,312.79. In 2013, after annexation, the valuation went to $327,240 with taxes of $8,892.74, a 677% increase. I ask how we can be expected to pay these amount of taxes with a chance of producing no income under the current zoning. Using the almost identical comparable, which also lies in Hays County near Needwall that I mentioned above, approved, constructed, and operating. Number 1, wastewater. City sewer versus on-site sewage plant. Floodplain versus floodplain. Safety concerns versus safety concerns. Where is the defining difference? We're only asking for a fair consideration on our request using all the information thoroughly provided. From myself and my family, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Please stay near. We may have some questions for you from the commission. You can have a seat, but just that we might have some questions. Well, city staff is going to use the podium.
Oh,
next.
okay.
Yes, sir. All righty. Next, Mr. Atkinson. Thank you, sir.
My name is Will Atkinson, city planner for the city of Kyle. Before you, we have petition number Z17016 for 1942 and 2000 Dacy Lane here in Kyle, Texas. They're looking to rezone almost 26 acres from agriculture to recreation vehicle. Normally, in the case of zoning considerations as of state law, we don't talk about what use is going in. Not really supposed to. In this case, it's being rezoned to RV, so we know exactly what's going in. Whenever we are looking to rezone in cases like this, whether it's single-family residential or if it's a duplex or it's multifamily or RV park, it's pretty it's pretty simple. We know what's going in. The project has R12 north of it that's already zoned. It's not developed because it's in a floodplain. You got retail services across Dacy Lane across from there, and hospital to the southwest, and then agriculture essentially to the south that hasn't been rezoned or redeveloped yet. It was annexed in and it retains its original zoning. Regarding the comprehensive plan, it is mostly in the Newtown community to the point to where it's almost, you don't even really consider anything in the super regional. No, there's a very small sliver of the corner. So regarding that, it is a conditional use in the Newtown community, which means versus recommended. So recommended means if it's recommended in there, there's a very high chance that it would get approved. We would look at different aspects of it, but there's not a lot of, I'm not going to say there's not a lot of thought, but it's pretty obvious that it would need to be approved. Conditional means you have to essentially drill down, think about it a little bit more, assess the situation, the land around it, all sorts of aspects, and a lot of it in this case is site development specific to this property. The biggest one is the floodplain. That cannot be discounted. The city's not anti-RV park development. It should be stated that we're looking at this at a site plan level, just some things that have popped up that are really concerning, not from the comprehensive plan. So most of the property, approximately 90%, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, is within the 100-year floodplain as it stands currently. That means there's at any given time a 1% chance that the storm will flood the property. That doesn't sound like much, but considering the last few years, what we've had, those are events that have far exceeded the 100-year floodplain. You can't really plan for those, we get that, but it is something that can't be discounted either. The city of Kyle Code does allow for structures to be built in the 100-year floodplain, but they have to have zero effect on the floodplain they are built in. And as to date, our floodplain administrator has not approved any development that has gone in terms of being built on the 100-year floodplain. And that's mostly because it's just too expensive to do that. To design it to where the point that it's going to have no effect it's really hard to do. In addition to that, section 53655 for the RV zoning, subsection A, subsection 1, requires an adequately drained site. They may be able to pull some of build up the land a little bit in the front phase of it, but even in a massive flood event, it's going to be really hard for it to drain because of the soil and water conservation dam that's right there. Even if they have an agreement, there's going to be a lot of concerns of flooding. It's just something staff feels like we can't ignore, even if it's addressed. It's the elephant in the room, essentially. Regarding that, they're going to have adequate vehicular access. The current driveway is sitting in the 100-year floodplain. They would have to build another access point, which they technically have, they just don't use, out of the 100-year floodplain to an adequate point of infrastructure that it can support fire access, emergency access, RVs and whatnot. Wastewater connections. The city of Kyle has an agreement with the Plum Creek Watershed Partnership to limit additional on-site sewage facilities or septic tanks. We essentially don't allow them. If you're in the city limits and you're within 500 feet of a wastewater line, you have to connect to wastewater. You don't get the option for septic. That being said, if you're below the nearest point where there's wastewater, generally from an engineering standpoint, that means a lift station or a pump station to pump it up to that point. Public Works has stated on numerous occasions that they do not encourage any lift stations or pump stations. They absolutely want to see gravity-fed wastewater because we have, as a city, limited manpower for the stations that do fail when they do fail, and they have to prioritize. And adding more lift stations is not helpful at all. So a design has to be in place that is gravity-fed. Additionally, as he did state, the same RV zoning district requirements do require each pad site to connect to sewer. Water also, they have to have a direct hookup. The RV park zoning requirements are actually pretty stringent. So they would spend a lot of money doing it also. Additionally, we have a statement from the Hayes County Emergency Services District 5, or the Kyle Fire Department. They have concerns for life safety. Even if it's all built up to code, they still have lots of concerns that they're going to have trouble getting adequate access into there. It hasn't even been designed, but just the fact that it's in that floodplain, and especially with larger storm events coming down the pipeline potentially. They suspect it would create a high risk for life safety to residents occupying the acreage, to firefighters and other first responders and rescue workers. When we look at a site plan as a staff, we haven't seen one yet, but if we look at one, we have to go by code. And if they build everything to code, we say yes, assuming it has the correct zoning. So I say that because even if they build it to code, we still have concerns that it would be a significant risk area related to the floodplain. So, do y'all have any questions for me?
Thank you, Mr. Atkinson. All right, we're going to open it up to the commission. I'm going to start to my left and move this way because I'm sure everyone has comments or questions. They could be directed towards city staff or the applicant. Commissioner Fenety.
Clarification. When you talked about structures in the floodplain, are you saying a pad is a structure?
Potentially.
I can help you out here. So structure by code is a habitable structure.
Okay.
That's the definition. So, so to answer your question, a pad, concrete pad, in this definition is not a structure.
I didn't think it would be, but I wasn't sure. Okay, that answers that question for now. Thanks.
All right, then Commissioner Fenety. Are we fine with just moving down the line, or do we want to jump around? Vice Chair Kay.
You said that if it was rezoned, the site plan still has to be to code for whatever they do with it. Yes. And it's a pretty good chance that there's no way they're going to be able to satisfy all the requirements of the code.
They might.
Is that what you were saying, or?
They might. The biggest one is adequate drainage. Yes. Being that they are in the floodplain.
In a basin, a floodplain of drainage.
So each soil and water conservation reservoir does have a drain on it, and they can open the valves on it. But in massive rain events, I wouldn't want to rely on
these words, propensity for erratic water behavior. I think that's a very valid, very strong issue there.
Okay.
Thank you, Vice Chair Kay. Commissioner Blok.
Yeah, I wanted to have an idea where the roads would be in relation to the floodplain. I know where the one road is currently that exits on Dacy Lane. I wanted to have an idea where that other road was going to be.
So,
probably talk with the applicant.
Yeah. Yeah, you can ask that, for sure.
The other road?
Yes, sir.
Far southwest corner, there's already an entryway there, but it's not used now, but it's there, but will be an entryway.
And
Mr. Green, it would, might be helpful also for the record if you've spoken to the mic as well.
And are you, when you're going to say that again, but are you saying that both roads would exit out to Dacy
Yeah,
Lane?
there's a pad, actually already a concrete entryway poured there in the far southwest corner, right off of Dacy Lane. We're currently not using it. We haven't needed it, we haven't used it, but that would be the.
So both roads would
Yes,
exit
there
to
would be
Dacy Lane?
two, yes. And that wouldn't be, that one is completely out of the floodplain, yes, ma'am.
And when you were talking about building up the land to try to have more of the land outside the floodplain?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you talking about building up that southwest corner?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it'll be in the far southwest corner of the property. It really isn't gonna take that terribly much. I don't know how many yards of earth, but to bring it up. Right now, the current road that goes into their housing back behind, which is on lot 2, I've had elevation shots there. It's about 4 or 4.5 feet at the road, and it slopes down quite rapidly. And we've had estimates, but of the backfill and and compacting everything to bring it up, but it won't take that much, but it can be done quite easily. The agreement I have with Plum Creek is the fact that we have to take the earth out of the floodplain area to bring that area up. We'll actually be creating a little bit, under a normal event, we'll be creating more storage capacity in the basin by doing that. But in a larger event, it probably wouldn't have that great effect in an extreme event. But that would elevate that area, that 5 acres in the area, would be completely out of it's a 665-foot elevation to the spillway of the dam, which is way below us, and it would be up above that, so it would be completely out of the floodplain. That 5 acres, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
All right. Commissioners? Commissioner Robinson?
Yeah. Do you have a conservation easement behind that dam that encumbers your property?
Have what now? I'm sorry.
A conservation easement behind that dam so that it can inundate your property?
I don't understand the question. The dam is not on our property.
Correct, but when it floods and it holds water?
They do have a water inundation easement, yes, sir. If
Okay.
that's what you're talking about.
That is. So that inundation easement, is your development going to encroach into that easement?
It will, but I have an agreement with Plum Creek signed by them through the Conservation District that allows us to do so.
Okay.
And I'll be glad to share that with you.
Okay, thank you. Another point that Will had made was that the city doesn't want any lift stations, and I believe that Mr. Green had said that he's going to have his own lift station that's not maintained by the city. And so that if your concern is the city having more lift stations to maintain, which is a valid concern, he's taking that off the table by having his own lift station. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay. I have a whole bunch of stuff written down here.
Yeah.
And I'm just
Go
going
ahead.
to kind of walk through all of it and just talk about it. You talked about access. I was concerned about having a second access that could be flooded. You said that you're going to have 2 accesses, one
Yes.
on the southwest side that can't be flooded, and then another one that could potentially be flooded?
The current one, yes, that we now use can be flooded in an extreme event, has been flooded a couple of times since we've lived there in 22 years, but it's an extreme event. 2013-15 it did. It came up above that. But again, like I addressed in my statement, that water, to do that, takes quite some time. I've lived there long enough. I've been through enough floods, I know. It takes several hours for that water to come up. And we're going to know, that if there's watching the weather conditions in the forecast, if there's a possibility of that. If there is, believe me, we will not put anybody's life in danger.
Right, yeah, it's typical for an RV park to have some of the spaces in a floodplain. It's not abnormal.
No, it's not abnormal at all. They're throughout.
When you have, my concern, though, is that you have, it sounded the way that you described it, having 2 sections of the RV park, one that's kind of nightly rentals or weekly or whatever you have, and then another section that's kind of more long-term.
Correct, yeah.
Can you describe that to me, because I don't understand that?
Well, the part that's up out of the floodplain completely, the 5 acres of 50, 55 pads, when we do the plat, we'll know exactly, but somewhere in that neighborhood, those will be units for people coming in from out of town, or maybe perhaps even we have people to question about people that are in a hospital, the rehab hospital, an option for them to put a RV park and stay there instead of spending $100, $150 a night in a motel room in areas such as that. Again, I want to address, we're not going to build and don't propose building a RV park.
But
We're
let's, site plan, are you going to have a second area of the RV park that isn't contiguous with the?
Yes, that's where I stayed. There, in phase 2, we will be putting some pads in, which would be in the floodplain, yes.
Okay.
And those would be rented on a short-term basis, not even 2-3 weeks, but like a few days or
Right.
weekend. There's overnighters. There's a lot of overnighters in this business. There's different clubs come through.
Okay.
It is a big business, and it's despite what's been described, it's not all sex offenders and transients. I know.
So a lot of people
I lived
talked
in
about-
Arizona. I sold an RV park in Arizona that had 1,300 spaces in. This thing was the top 5 in the nation.
Yeah.
There was 1,300 spaces in there. Those people come in, I'm talking about classy people.
Right. So a lot of people talked about it being a mobile home or a trailer park. Or can you describe that you're not having an RV, they're not mobile homes that are there, they're not park models, they're not RVs? Can you describe what it
No, they're
is?
not park models. They are recreational vehicles. Some of them may be self-propelled, like the buses and stuff. You're going to have units in there that cost $300,000-$400,000, I can tell you that. And you're going to have the smaller units, pull buses, light pickup trucks. They're not attached permanently to the property.
Okay.
They're all attached, but quick disconnects can be removed quickly in any scenario. And but it's not a mobile home park. It's
Right.
not a permanent fixture.
Will, is it possible, just to talk about it, is it possible for an RV zoning to have a mobile home station there?
I think what he wants to know is what falls within the RV land use.
Yeah. So like if it's excluded from having a mobile home or a trailer or whatever you want to call it, modular home, located in an RV zoning, well then, I think that's important for this.
So, land areas of the city zoned RV and having an approved plat may be used for dependent recreational vehicles, dependent travel trailers, independent recreational vehicles, independent travel trailers, and recreational vehicles and travel trailers as defined in section 53-651.
Yeah, and so reading further into that, the definition of recreational vehicle and travel trailer means, right in the opening clause, a vehicle or similar portable structure designed for recreational use and travel, having no foundation other than wheels, jacks, blocks, or skirting, 600 square feet or less of enclosed area, so designed or constructed as to permit occupancy for dwelling or sleeping purposes, provided, however, a mobile home or manufactured home is not a recreational vehicle or travel trailer, and for purposes of determining the distances specified herein, the term recreational vehicle and travel trailer includes portable, prefabricated, temporary room, commonly called a cabana, that is attached to the room. So they're clearly meant to remain
I think your microphone's
on
off.
their wheels and did it turn off?
I think so.
Might have never been on. I'll just reset it.
Okay.
So it's pretty clear that the purpose of the structure is that it's on wheels, on axles, which are not removed, and it's not permanently attached to anything, and it's designed for recreational use and travel.
Okay, so to say it again, mobile homes, modular homes, or trailer park would not be a correct classification for the zoning that he's requesting?
Correct.
Okay. I have some other comments here. So just as an aside, what he's talked about as far as excavating within the floodplain in order to build up the floodplain, to get it out of the floodplain, to make it usable, that's a perfectly legal and highly regulated act, procedure that the city's going to look at with a microscope. May have to. I think it's going to have to be go to FEMA for approval.
Correct, yeah.
So it's not something that he's just going to hire some guy with an excavator and hope it works. There's going to be a lot of engineering calculations behind the work. As far as taxes, I think someone brought up whether or not the people who would be staying there would be paying taxes. He's going to. Is it true that he's going to have to pay hotel occupancy tax for these RVs, or is that?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think RV is considered a personal property, not real property. So I don't really know, but I'm assuming they wouldn't have to pay a motel tax.
Okay, sometimes you do.
I've never had that brought up, but I wouldn't think so.
Okay. In any case, you've already indicated that your land basis has gone up, and you're already paying additional city taxes as a result, correct?
Yeah, 666% since we were annexed.
And the people who presumably would be staying there, whether it be a night or a month, are going to have to buy gas and other city services.
They'll be spending money here, the money will stay, they'll be come and go, but the money will stay.
So there will be
yes, sir.
some tax revenue, not significant, but there will be some.
Yeah, and again, we're going to advertise, and it's going to be an upscale resort. It's not going to be a RV park
Right.
that's been described by some individuals here tonight. It's going to be highly regulated, highly monitored, and the prices that will be in there will limit, and we will not let anybody, there will be no permanent residents there, period. It's an RV park for visitors and even weekenders from the city. It's on a lake, fishing, we have a basketball court
I'm going to
there.
try and go through the list pretty quickly, so I'm
Okay.
just going to knock them off here
Sure.
real quick. So I think someone had mentioned about sex offenders or criminal backgrounds, and I've been to RV parks before, and I mean, I could never afford the $300,000 RVs that are literally going to be parked in his place. Maybe, the $30,000 or $40,000 ones, but I understand the concern about having transient style housing. From what Mr. Green has described here, that's not the case. It's not a trailer park. It's not a mobile home park. It's not a transient housing in the sense that it's people who can't find legitimate housing elsewhere or just need a week or two to stay while they find their next place. This is going to be someone that's traveling across America, going to see their grandkids, and hey, let's stop in Kyle because they got that balloon festival, and I can't remember the HOA president's name. I apologize for that. Mr. Hobbs. You had mentioned crime in the mobile home parks that are in your district up in Austin, South Austin. So that's like Chateau Village and right. Yes, yeah, I'm aware of that one. And then there's another one on Slaughter Lane, across from that the IDEA school, right? And then there's one next to Chateau Village Way, right? And those are the types that you're referencing are high crime. I used to live in that area, so I'm well aware of what you're talking about as far as consider. And again, I'm just talking out loud so everyone knows.
I understand, and you're also talking about just, I could buy a used trailer, pull in there for, $5,000. So, yeah, you gotta say both spectrums now.
Yeah, I'm getting to that. So I'm delineating the difference between a mobile home park, which is the Chateau Village Way, and then now let's go talk about the one. Is it okay for him to come up to the podium so that we can
You have a
have it on
question
record?
for him? Yes.
Mr. Hobbs, would you come up to the podium so we can have it on record? There's enough people here that I think a long discussion about all the options, and if that's okay with everyone,
Do you have a question specifically for him?
Yeah, so I am concerned about crime because I don't want to approve a use that's going to invite additional legitimate crime.
Correct.
So talk to me about the RV park that's right there by what you said, the Megaplex,
Yes.
right there off of 35,
Yes.
right south of William Cannon.
Correct.
So tell me about that, because I know they have some park models, and then they also, that one there, I know that they have long-term leases where you pay by month.
They have the new tiny homes.
Those are called park models, to be, that's what they like to call them.
I call them tiny homes because that's what I watch on TV
Yeah.
with my wife.
They're trying to get away from that term because it never was successful, so now they're park models, but go ahead.
Yes, they have those, and they have the short-term and long-term.
Mhm.
And we get a lot of drug activity out of there. Our Metro Tech team goes in there all the time. We have, most of it is you're going to have drugs and you're going to have family violence. That's normally your two highest crimes right there.
Would you say it's on par with some of the other trailer parks that are, and I used to live in Chateau Village Way, which is the gated community.
I've been there.
Right there. I lived there for 2 years while I was, figuring out where I wanted to live. And then I moved to Kyle. But would you say that it's consistent as far as the crime across those two types of land use?
It's a little higher. It's a little higher at the RV park there. It is. And that's because it's more transient, because those are short-term. So Chateau Village, they take pride in where they're at.
That's right.
Plus, the manager there is very strict.
Yeah.
And she makes you mow your grass, she makes you do everything else.
She tickets you within 5 minutes of parking on the grass.
You're not lying, because I've dealt with her many, many times. And with the RV park, that's not there. That consistency is not there. So it's a little different. And I understand there's, $300,000 RV. Yeah, there'll be some of those, but there, no. There's not been one there in a while like that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Hobbs.
Let's see. And then,
If I would address one
Sure.
other
Yeah.
issue that you brought up. He was talking about perhaps bringing somebody, buying an RV for $5,000 or bringing it. We're going to have limits on years, In other words, something over so many years is not allowed. There will be no families. There's going to be a limit on occupants. So, that part is not going to be any issue in the resort that we're going to.
all right, okay, so fair housing doesn't allow you to restrict based on families unless you are specifically calling it like a over 55 age restricted. That's the only one that you can do. Are you saying that you're going to age restrict?
No, I did not say that. If that's so, perhaps you're right. I'm not acquainted with that law, but we will have restrictions to limit. We're not going to. Otherwise, we're not going to have families moving there permanently and living. It ain't going to happen.
Yeah,
We're not.
typically it's not, but like sometimes someone's building a house, they might, I've known people that bought an RV and lived in one for a year.
Yeah. But still, we're going to have restrictions, on year models and that. So nobody's going to go buy one for $3,000 or $4,000 and pull it in there and park it. I'll put it that way.
Okay, thank you. Will, one of the comments was regarding traffic. Can you address their concerns regarding what the city's requirements are for traffic impact study and things like that?
At this time, there really isn't.
Well, just generally, what will he have to comply with in order to satisfy the city's code for traffic? So he'll do a traffic impact analysis that will, there's no traffic studies?
No, we're not quite there yet.
Oh.
We're trying to get that in place.
Okay,
but,
well, I'm surprised, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's part of the reason I didn't mention in much or anything, actually, in the staff
Okay.
report regarding traffic impacts.
Do you know what the traffic count is on Dacy Lane?
I do not.
Okay. So then, another comment from the public hearing was regarding noise. And so it's a perfectly legitimate concern to have noise there. But as I'm looking there, the edge of the property, which he's not developing all the way to the edge of his property, if you look up on the screen, all the way to your right, from what he's articulated, he's only going to be about 500 feet on the left side or the southwest side of his property, which leaves, just from looking at the scale here, about 1,500 feet between the edge of what would be his RV park and the edge of Kensington trails. And so that's kind of a long ways.
If we have a question, because we can't just allow everyone to just interject.
Public hearing, public request is over. If I have a specific question, I'll pull you up and answer that. But it isn't something that any other use might not have noise. So, for instance, let's say that he can't sustain he can't pay the taxes because the city annexed him, so he sells it to some other developer who's got more money to hire bigger engineers and more attorneys that are going to help enforce his property rights. What if he were to get, what if that were a mobile home park or something else that he could put, that a future developer could put? That is another possibility. I mean, the point I'm making is that having noise to be the reason to not develop, it would be, I would not always use that, just because it's a way to restrict other people's property rights. But, so, that's all I have to say about that. If it were right next door, it would be a legitimate concern, in my opinion. And if I were living in Kensington Trails, you know, and it was right there, the RV park were adjacent, then it would be a big concern. About being close to the school, just looking at it, just for the record, it looks like it's about 3,000 feet from the school. That's pretty far away. I know there's no other ways for traffic to get around through Dacy Lane. It's kind of like the only road to get over to the school, but it is 3,000 feet away. Plenty of time for, you know, some traffic to kind of dissipate a little bit. But I don't think that this development is going to, and the reason I asked for the traffic counts is, let's say there's 1,500 cars going down Dacy Lane. If he's going to have 50 to 55 RVs, that's a small number in comparison to the traffic going on Dacy Lane. And then I think I've talked about everyone's concerns, unless I missed one. I think the only one I didn't talk about was property values. That hold on.
We cannot have that, please.
So from your own evidence, property values are stagnant, if not going down a little bit, and the market hadn't even understood that there could potentially be an RV park here. I think the most detrimental to your subdivision is the mobile home park that's kind of on the other side, and the apartment complex. I think those are more detrimental to 50 to 55 RV parks spaces here. So then I'll just talk about my own consideration, if I can, or...
Well, this is open discussion for us to ask staff and the applicant questions.
So I personally don't like the two different entrances without connecting the two, because in the event that there were a flood event, the RVs that are in the lower section would not have a way to get out. I mean, you'd want two ways to get out. I know that he mentioned that he's going to monitor it 24/7. I think everyone monitors the weather nowadays 24/7. So not yet. If I have a question, I'll call you up. But so if the city were to move forward, I would advise of having requiring, I don't know if we can require specificity on the site plan. Yeah. So I would just caution the applicant, if it does go forward, don't know if it would, to connect the two RV parts. That's all I have for now. So.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Robinson. Commissioner Koch, did you have a...
Yes, Chair. Will, I have a question for you real quick. And Howard. On the municipal code, under that 53-651, it says a general period of time less than 12 months in duration. Is that in stone? I mean, is it like you can't be there longer than 12 months with your RV? Or can they move to a different spot and it's starting over?
Yeah, you took a couple key words out of that sentence, but that's an exceptionally long run-on sentence of a definition. And what he's referring to is the definition of recreational vehicle park and travel trailer park. And the full definition reads, means any plot of ground upon which one or more recreational vehicles or travel trailers are located or are occupied for dwelling or sleeping purposes during travel, vacations, periods of temporary work such as construction, and other periods of time generally less than 12 months in duration, regardless of whether or not a charge is made for the accommodations, regardless of whether or not they charge you rent. So the expectation in this definition is supposed to control the actual use of land, meaning, you know, what functionally is the land use. And it is meant to be temporary for purposes during travel, vacation, or periods of temporary work would be another expectation of when somebody would occupy a recreational vehicle park in their recreational vehicle. But the open-ended part of that is what Commissioner Koch refers. He reads, other periods of time generally less than 12 months in duration. So the expectation is it is not supposed to be for permanent residents, and it should be less than 12 months in duration. Whether or not somebody picks up and moves to a different spot, my interpretation would be that does not meet the letter nor the spirit, because you're still in the park if you move from pad to pad to pad. The expectation is that you occupy the park for less than 12 months and then you vacate, because it is not meant for it to be permanent. And despite someone saying, well, 3 years is temporary to me, I mean, I think statutorily, we would all look at a definition of anything that happens for more than 6 months. There's an expectation of permanency just because of that time period. So it's not spelled out in here, but my interpretation would be you would be in the boundaries of the park for less than a year.
Did that answer your question, Commissioner Koch?
Yeah, I just want to remind our new commissioners that it doesn't matter what the applicant told us he was going to do with it. He can state that there's going to be $300,000 RVs there. There can be $15,000 broken down horrible RVs there with a new owner who can buy it from him if we rezone it to RV. We have to decide whether or not we think that's going to happen. But based on what he says, as the owner, it doesn't matter. It's just the land use. Still made up my mind on this. This is a tough one. I can see.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Koch. Commissioner Fenety.
Mr. Green, I ignored your sign that said "Do not enter." I said, I ignored your sign that said "Do not enter." And I drove in.
You're not the only one.
Yeah. I figured if anybody came out with a gun or stopped me, I'd say, I'm on P&Z.
They'll really shoot you.
I can understand why it is, driving down there, that this would be a logical place, because it's beautiful. It's really beautiful. The water and you know, you've kept it up and all that sort of thing. And I think you do have kids around. Uh-huh. Because I noticed some recreational stuff around. I also remember, was it last year, when we couldn't use Dacy Lane because of the, yeah, or the year before, we couldn't use it? And the fire department had to come wash off the bridge before we could go through, and so that concerns me. But I also understand that, you know, there may be a way to get people out of there without impacting. The other thing,
We were closely monitored,
I understand. The other thing that I have heard, and that we had one thing withdrawn, one application withdrawn, because the property couldn't sell because they didn't have access to the wastewater treatment system in there because of no lift station. Is that?
Which property?
Along Dacy in there. Is that something that you recall?
Are you referring to this property in question or a different property along
No,
Dacy?
a different property along Dacy that was taken off the market, and I think it had come up and was withdrawn. Anyway, be that as it may, if something's going to happen along Dacy there, be it an upscale mobile home park, an upscale RV park or a taco stand, there's going to have, in order for people to be able to use it, there's got to be some sort of access to sanitary sewer things. Is there any other way that they could do it? Because this man's paying $8,000 a year, over $8,000 a year, and he can't do anything. Got any clues, Howard? Look in your crystal ball.
I have many clues. No
Okay.
answers, but clues.
Clues, okay.
Would you like me to address, I have, okay.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Coons.
My name's Howard Kuntz. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Kyle, for the record. First of all, I just want to say it's really
great that we've got a full boat. I'm so glad that there are 7 of you up here. I hope y'all never leave, because it really helps a lot.
Got
So
some good ones.
I believe that to be true, yes. I am not going to be the wise sage that has all the answers for you. I've struggled with this from the time that it came in and have thought about it quite a bit. Much like yourselves, I've thought about the challenges to this going forward. You know, on its face, there's a lot of big issues here. For me, the number one was the life safety issue of the floodplain itself. And for those of us who do this long enough, you can understand that those are not insurmountable. It is absolutely usual and customary to cut and fill in a 100-year floodplain to create usable areas that can be built upon as long as there's a negligible effect, and there is quite a bit of oversight, both federal, state, and local oversight for the site development of the property. So that can happen. Wastewater is another big challenge. This property is in a bowl. It absolutely is in a bowl. The nearest means for true gravity wastewater service is somewhere in the neighborhood of over 1,800 feet, and it would have to go around the dam. That's the South Lake Dam, which I cannot imagine that the Soil Conservation Service is going to be interested in anybody poking around their structural soil that holds that water back. There is another solution for them that's closer. It just happens to be uphill. So they have mentioned that they are willing to take on the expense of the installation and the expense of the maintenance of a lift station that will be able to connect to the city's system. So that, again, on its face, looks like it's an issue that's been taken care of. The one issue that I have not been able to rectify doesn't have anything to do with any of these situations. All this stuff is in the weeds. This is the trees of the forest, but if you want to step back for a minute and look at the forest itself, I always go back to the comprehensive plan. I have a lot of faith in our comprehensive plan. I know not everyone does, but I think if you read it often enough and start to rely upon it, it actually does give you a fair amount of direction. And I keep going back to the intent of the Newtown district. So this property is by and large in the Newtown district. There is a small sliver of it that's located per the lines on the map. A small sliver of it is in the super regional node, but I stated to the group before you and for the folks that are new, I do not believe that the lines on that map are hard and fast. I consider them more to be fuzzy, and the colors somewhat blend into one another. And the deciding factor of whether or not something's brown versus something is red versus something is green is the determination that's made on the ground. So although you might be standing on this piece of land and realize that the super regional node is down half a block and around those trees, and I'm actually in the Newtown, sometimes that moves this way and sometimes it moves that way, just a function of how it works at a block level. What I've looked at here, the super regional node intent does not apply to the property at all. If you'll read the intent of the super regional node, it's supposed to be an economic development generator. That's it. It's based upon high classification of roads and the ability to get human beings into it and out of it for the purpose of employment and commerce. So for that reason, I would say that none of this property is truly located in the super regional node, despite the fact that it is on a piece of paper. 95% of the property is in the Newtown district. So we'll look at the Newtown district and find out what the intent is. And that paragraph that's in the comprehensive plan, and it's also cut and pasted and put into your staff report this evening. It's on page 5 of 7, and it talks about the intent of the Newtown district. The topic sentence of the intent reads, the Newtown district is designed to contain a horizontal mix of land uses that should be integrated across the area to express a cohesive community form.
Say that again, please.
The Newtown district is designed to contain a horizontal mix of land uses that should be integrated across the area to express a cohesive community form. So horizontal, as opposed to vertical mixed uses, which is buildings coming out of the ground, horizontal mix is a lower density development pattern that spreads out, it sprawls out, rather than high density, which is typically restricted to a single smaller lot and comes higher out of the ground. So they seek a horizontal mix of land uses and integrate it across the area to express a cohesive community form. And the question I ask myself is, with the development of the super-regional node, which we don't ignore, we just have to establish where this property is. This is immediately adjacent to that super-regional form, which has a large amount of retail services and hospital services, with an expectation that that will create high-intensity employment centers and commerce areas. And then we need a reasonable transition as you move away from that high-intensity district into the lower-intensity districts, which are primarily being developed in a land pattern for residential uses. I think Kensington bears that out. Amberwood, to an extent, bears that out. And if you go across country a little bit, you get to South Lake and some of the older subdivisions as you continue to move away from this property. Whether or not this use itself integrates very well into that as a buffer between the commercial and the residential, I don't know that I have an empirical stat that I can point to, but my gut tells me that it doesn't. It doesn't seem to fit very well to have a recreational use which is predicated mostly on the idea of the landform on which it's located. They're putting an RV park on this because it is next to a lake, you know, in a floodplain. It's the type of area where you would expect the escape that you would receive from spending time in a vacation setting, for lack of a term, you know, not permanent, not residential. So is this a tiny little oasis of escape, I'll call it, in the middle of this otherwise, you know, Dacy Lane corridor? I can't look at myself with a straight face and say, yes, it is. 12 years ago, 15 years ago, I think this question tonight would have been a lock. It would have been as close to a rubber stamp of a zoning than you can get. There would have been no 1626. There would have been no hospital. There would have been no associated retail around this. Subdivisions would have been few, far between, and brand new. And this would have been very rural for hundreds of feet in every direction. Now that's not the emerging land pattern. I think there's going to be more employment uses that are going to be springing up around the hospital, both not just to the south, which has a lot of new road infrastructure that's been done with the connection of Philomena all the way down to 35. So not just pulling back towards the old part of town, but moving up 35 north of the hospital, all the way up over BB and back towards Amberwood. I think a lot of that property in close proximity to 35 will develop, and then it'll start to move to the east as well. Whether or not this property fits in, again, I can't comfortably say it does. The minor nuisances, we'll call it, they have a plan. The applicant's here this evening, and he says he pretty much has a plan to overcome all those. So the question becomes, when you think of rezoning, the first question you have to ask yourself is, does the applicant have reasonable use and utility of the property as is? Or is he being kept from a higher and better use because of the zoning that's applied, and should it be rezoned? I can't think of a high and good use for this floodplain property that's in ag. I mean, it's not enough acres for pasturage. It's not going to be enough acres for silage crops or any type of row crop. So the agricultural uses are probably restrictive, but the idea of the RV park, that's one use. It's one possibility. I don't envy you and your expectation for making this decision. But I would tell you, if you're searching for answers, I think the comprehensive plan is a pretty good place to look for those answers. Certainly not the worst place. So that's been my analysis of this. We can't speak basically about the operations of the property after it's zoned. Most of the deleterious effects to the health, safety, and welfare of the community ultimately break down to code compliance enforcement. You have to go out there, either show pride of ownership as the property owner and put in rules that you maintain, and anything that gets bigger than that becomes a function of law enforcement, be it civil or criminal. Do we want to create the opportunity for increased pressures on code compliance? Can we rely upon the operations of the property owner so that it doesn't become a nuisance? I don't have that answer. It's just another question. So I can make myself available if anybody has any specific questions for me, but I guess the short story of that long rambling diatribe there was that I've been trying to look at it from a higher level without getting so far into the weeds.
Thank you, Mr. Coons.
I've got
Commissioner Oppel, you're recognized.
Yeah, probably going to surprise a lot of people what I'm going to say here. When this was first published in the Haze Free Press, I looked at it in the Haze Free Press, and incidentally, it was on the same day that we got the proposed zoning for just down on Dacy Lane for RS, as you recall, that we approved. And the day after that, I thought to myself, well, this is a nutty idea. So I got in the car, as I usually do, and drove out to the locations that were mentioned. And I will echo what Commissioner Fenety said. I took a first look at it and said, wow, what a beautiful spot. I mean, this is gorgeous. However, I just can't get past the idea that it's in the floodplain. William called it the elephant in the room. You called it a serious issue. To me, it's a deal killer. And I heard the applicant's solution for that, and here's the question I have for you, Mr. Coons. Isn't that basically a land use issue? We cannot really consider that in our judgment, that require him to make those kind of fixes to that in order to rezone that? Isn't that when you technically?
So generally, it's definitely within your purview to consider the health, safety, and welfare of the community at large for every specific request that comes to you.
Mhm.
So in that light, you can look at the whole idea of the core conservation dams is a stormwater management effort to preserve the downstream. Anytime someone gets in there and does any type of disturbance or development in those areas near the dams or upstream floodplains, those have downstream consequences. Whether or not you guys can get into the weeds of site plan design, I don't recommend that. And I think we should just let that pony run. We all know that there will be site development constraints, but that's something that's first regulated by code, federal, state, and local, and then it's regulated by the practitioners here in City Hall and elsewhere, whoever has purview of that. So I wouldn't worry about is it possible? If your question is,
No,
is
I'm
it
asking,
possible,
should we
it's
consider it?
possible.
I'm asking,
Yes.
is it at a land use? And as such, should we even consider that as part of our deliberation?
I think you should consider whether or not it's prudent. Whether or not it can happen is our problem. Whether or
Yeah.
not it's prudent to even do it in the first place is definitely within your purview, yes.
The other thing is most of you know here, and I said from the very beginning, I'm a proponent of the smart growth philosophy and planning, and the smart growth philosophy says you just don't locate things in a floodplain, especially since I no longer like the designation of 100-year floodplain, when I think Commissioner Koch will remember in the late 90s, there was a significant flood in San Marcos, and since then there has been even more significant flood in San Marcos. They don't happen every 100 years. They happen with alarming regularity. And Commissioner Fenety and I recently went to a conference in San Marcos where they also told us in no uncertain terms, it is not smart to build in a floodplain or locate things in a floodplain. So to me, that's the deal killer for me. I'm not going to be able to support the request because of that. And knowing that I can't really, since I consider what he wants to do with it as a land use, I really can't make that part of my considerations. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Oppel. Commissioner Robinson, you're recognized.
I got a question for Mr. Kuntz, is there a density in the zoning for RV parks?
Talks about 2,500 square feet per plot inside the park.
That's
with,
the land area associated for each
with-
RV space?
That's correct.
Okay.
And then with 35 feet of clear width for each spot, so
Okay.
to make sure that they're not, slivers that are on top of one another.
Yep.
So it talks a little bit about.
Does it talk about,
the
like, you
bulk
can't have
standard.
more than 10 per acre or anything like that?
No, it doesn't give a number.
So those
of that
rules-
density. It talks about the size of the plot per the parent area.
Okay, so then at most, he's going to get 12 to 14, 15 per acre, given those rules with a drive aisle and stuff like that?
I guess the gross density would be,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, okay. I don't know that I like the amount of, I don't have as much concern about the floodplain because I know there's engineering solutions to get around that. And I know that there's a way to make it a well-drained site, even if he excavates in the floodplain and to reclaim some area that used to be on the floodplain. Is it possible for us to table it and have him resubmit for a smaller, so right now he's asking to rezone the entire tract. If we were to table it or deny his request, could we do that with a consideration of maybe come back with 2 acres, knowing that it's going to eventually lead to a restriction of how much he can develop an RV park? Is that kind of a compromise?
We won't split zoning on a single lot.
You don't do that?
No.
Okay.
So you would have to
Would he have-
divide the lot for the boundary
Right.
of the zoning.
So would he have to, is it, through this development process, is he going to have to replat his property?
It'll have to be platted land if it hasn't been recorded till now, yes, all
Okay.
development parcels.
And it looks like it was only just surveyed out for his, I guess it was his daughters or your children? Okay. So no matter what, he's going to have to come with a plat?
Mhm.
Okay. So then it's possible that the platted lot for his RV park that he's going to get financing on and ultimately have an entity that maintains and operates the facility could be very small, could be smaller. Instead of having 50 to 55 RV parks, and I'm just throwing this out, I'm not saying I support it, I'm just as an option, maybe. It could be a smaller, maybe a 2-acre tract that he could then represent to the planning and zoning.
The one challenge that and we don't have legal here tonight, but the one challenge that I'm thinking is that it may be construed as a contract between the city and the applicant to read that we'll approve if, and the if would being, making sure the diminutive size of the
Right.
project versus what they're asking
Okay.
for. And we're not allowed to engage in those types of contracts. So I think tonight and moving forward, we need to consider the application on its merits.
I agree, and what I'm saying is, regardless of the outcome, maybe the applicant wants to reconsider the size and scope of his development.
It could, yeah, because if this request gets to fruition in front of the council and it were denied, no application for zoning can be made on this property for 12 months following that
Right.
decision.
Whereas if we deny it now, what's this timeframe as far as coming back before us with a new application?
Well, this is just a recommending body.
We're just
so
making a
Okay.
recommendation.
Your decision this evening
I was
is not
going to say
binding.
that.
Gotcha. So we could conceivably deny his request, it doesn't, and it then goes to city council for their
Correct.
request?
Mhm.
And then, but he could also pull it before it goes to city council to
That's
kind of
correct.
regroup and
Mhm.
redesign? Okay.
Absolutely. And if that were the case, if he withdraws without prejudice, then he can immediately apply again.
I see.
Get back in the queue. But
Okay.
if the request is adjudicated in any way, it's 12 months before another one can come.
Yeah, okay.
Mr.
Thank you for
Chairman?
that.
Vice Chair Kay.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wanted everybody to know that maybe somebody doesn't know, we're just making a recommendation tonight to City Council. It holds weight, and it'll sway their decision possibly, but the decision will be made by City Council next week, I guess.
The first reading would be a week from this evening.
First reading will be next, so y'all going to have to go through this again. So, having said that, a zoning change, we're dedicating this property to be, if it goes through, it will be a recreational vehicle zoned property. And whatever is done with it the next few years, next 10 years, 15 years, until it's changed, which changing a zoning is not that easy, I don't think. But regardless, whatever nice things are done today, 20 years from now won't be. Management will change, rules will change, all the good intentions may just go out the window, and it may just be a really bad place. My second point is the flooding is definitely an issue. The words propensity for erratic water behavior, that means a lot to me. Say they know a flood's going to happen, they get everybody out there, but there's things left behind. All those things wash down, create a dam, block the water for a little while, and then it all cuts loose, and then a wall of water goes downstream to whatever's in its way. And that's a very real possibility that does happen. It's usually trees and stuff, but this might be a trailer they couldn't get out of there, picnic benches, buildings, smaller buildings they put up. So that's just, there's no guarantee that there's a possibility that this won't happen. The fact that his tax appraisal has gone up precipitously, I think you should argue next time around, when you go and argue about your tax appraisal. And it's unfortunate, and I'm sorry about that, but anyway, that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Vice Chair Kay. Commissioner Blok, anything? Okay, just anything on this end? Commissioner Fenety?
I've got a lot of things on my mind, and this is hard. To those of you who came here tonight from the neighborhood, I get it. I'm really sorry that you didn't talk to this man first. I'm really sorry, and I'm glad you're here because I think that we've shed some light on maybe who the people are, because this is partly about people. But I've got that bridge being flooded on my brain. I've got the beauty of the site on my brain. I've also got the question of what the heck is the man going to do with his property if we can't let him do this? I mean, I'm totally just befuddled. That's all I've got to say.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Fenety. Commissioner Koch?
I used to drive the Kensington trails every day for 2 years, and when I would pass by this piece of land, and it's before I knew who owned it until tonight, but I would see it and go, man, it's beautiful. I didn't know something like that existed in that part of Kyle. It is in the floodplain. I guess my question is is it Mr. Hobbs?
Sir.
Are you concerned, and I know you're speaking for the majority of your neighborhood, are you concerned about RVs? Are you concerned about $300,000 RVs or dilapidated RVs? Because I think we've come to the conclusion that it's not going to be mobile homes.
I know it's not going to be mobile homes. I know it's not going to be mobile homes.
Please.
So going back to your point over there about the crime, so the crime, what happens is when you do have those lower income, and not all the $300,000.
Right, I don't want to assume a lower income.
I'm not assuming anything.
Okay.
What happens is, so the drug calls, they go in and they break in, so you've got more crime around that. That's what I'm worried about. Because you've got a transient population that's only there for a short time, and if they need a drug fix, that's where they go. They go into the neighborhoods and they break into cars. And they take that stereo, I can go sell it for $25. I got 3 crack rocks right now. I can get high. When you guys started building hotels, first thing I said to my wife is, oh my God. You know, to me as a police officer, unfortunately, I'm tainted. I'm ruined for the rest of my life because I see the bad in everything. And I do that so you don't have to see the bad in everything. I see dead people every day. You don't have to. And I do that so you don't have to. And I see this, and I see the crime it brings. And it's higher around those neighborhoods because of the break-ins. You know, I'm not worried about a $300,000 one. If you're $300,000, you're not coming in to commit a crime. You can afford it. But I'm afraid of those ones that come in there that they're in between jobs and they need a place to stay for a while. And they're going to stay there. And they're going to stay there a couple of months, 3 or 4 months, while they're looking for jobs. And if they don't find a job.
Okay, so getting back to my point, if this place was full of $300,000 RVs, would that be a problem for Kensington Trails?
Probably so, because of the noise. You've got the noise factor then. He says it's not a problem. He says
Hold on,
it's not a problem.
But there are plenty of RVs that are worth $300,000.
Sure.
I've met plenty of people who have those kind of RVs that are 2 or 3 times my house. That's what I'm trying to get to the bottom of.
I know.
I look at the land and it's gorgeous.
It is. We were promised, when I bought that house, how many of you were promised that lived there, were told they were going to put a hike and bike trail around it and we were going to have that use? That's what we were told when we bought that. That would be awesome if you turned that into a city park.
Did you go to your developer and ask him to provide on his promise?
Do I now?
Did you go to your developer who promised those trails and ask him to deliver on that
It
promise?
wasn't a developer, it was a sales associate.
Did you go to his boss and ask him to deliver on that promise?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because
they didn't.
Okay.
I think you answered. So you'd be concerned either way?
Yes,
It doesn't
of course.
matter how upscale this RV park is?
No.
You're just against it in general?
Yes.
Okay, I'm good. I thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hobbs. All right, we'll move back down this way. Commissioner Robinson.
I've got a question for Mr. Green, if you could come up. So, you said that your taxes had gone up, but currently it's zoned agricultural. Do you not have an ag exemption on your property?
It was originally zoned single-family housing when we bought the property. At one time, there was a mobile home. My brother-in-law actually lived on that property, but it was moved, I think, like 8 years ago, perhaps. And after that, and then the city, in turn, annexed the property. We were in the county at that time.
Yep.
They annexed the property, and in 2013, they raised the taxes from the numbers I gave you, $47,000 up to $8,000, almost $9,000.
Have you ever attempted, you don't have any livestock?
I have disputed it, and they lowered it just a fraction.
Right, but do you have any, have you ever attempted to pursue getting a full ag exemption on your property? Not the zoning, zoning is separate, but I'm talking about an ag exemption.
Well, that takes time. I mean, anytime
Have you ever
go-
pursued that?
I have not pursued it, no.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So one of the concerns that I have is just like what you were saying is, I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Fenety.
Coach.
No.
Or Koch.
Fenety.
Yes,
The
Fenety.
handsome guy?
The handsome guy with the nice beard?
Okay.
I mean, you had mentioned that his taxes had gone up, but what else can he do with it? And then it's such a beautiful property. If he had an ag exemption, then I would not be in favor of this zoning change. But he doesn't have an ag exemption. However, nothing precludes him from getting or pursuing an ag exemption on the property if his main concern is taxes. If he's concerned that, man, my taxes went from 1,000 to 8,000, it's large enough, I believe, that he could get an ag exemption.
But
You have to have a couple of animals, yeah. I'm
But you
not,
can't have them in the city. Right? I
It's a-
mean, didn't we go through this with mini horses or whatever?
Mini
I mean,
pigs. Yeah.
maybe, and I apologize for it being my first.
No, I mean,
meeting.
I'm just, no, don't apologize. We like this. And welcome to the crazy crowd here tonight.
Great meeting for the first time.
Yeah, but I think that if you have a couple of animals, I'm not sure you can have them in the city limits. They have them.
Oh, all right.
There's cattle. Okay, what do I know? But
Yeah, so I'm
I
pretty.
just thought we had many horses who were giving us problems once upon a time.
A lot of times, developers will get ag exemption to lower their tax base while they're developing plans, and so it'd be rare for the city not to allow ag-zoned properties to function as an agricultural property, and then thereby get the ag-exempt tax status. Just as a side note.
Thank you, Commissioner Robinson. Commissioner Oppel, you're recognized.
Going to try to attempt to break the logjam here. I know Commissioner Fenety said she was befuddled, so I'm going to try to move it along. So, and I know that debate can continue after I do what I'm about to do, but I'm going to officially move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend to the City Council to deny the requested RV zoning on this property.
All right, we have the motion by Commissioner Oppel to deny the request for rezoning from ag to...
No, to recommend to the City Council that it deny.
Yes, that they deny.
And it's strictly, again, based on the floodplain issue. I can't get by it.
All right.
Second.
We have the motion, and we have a second by Vice Chair Kay. Let's begin the discussion on the motion. I will say, I know well, first of all, I appreciate this commission, and I appreciate the conversation, the discussion that's happened tonight. This is not an easy decision. There are a lot of things to consider. Mr. Green, I also looked at the property. I didn't quite have I wasn't as brave as some of the other commissioners to go onto the property, but it is an absolutely beautiful property. And the question for me as well was, if not this, what could you do? And I have a little sympathy for that. But at the end of the day, I'm about planning. And I also agree with Commissioner Oppel that it's not wise to develop an existing floodplain. And that was, honestly, I kicked a number of things around. I tried to see if I can get around that. But for me, and I understand the issues that were brought up from the folks of Kensington Trails. I appreciate you coming out. I want to always say I appreciate anybody coming out to planning and zoning. This is a very important process and development for a city. I wish we could get crowds like this all the time, but I appreciate you all coming out, hearing the concerns. But honestly, for me, I would not be able to rest well knowing going forward with this zoning. So I just want to state that I would be against this rezoning, and my recommendation would be to have council not allow the rezoning to RV. Open it up discussion here. We have the motion by Commissioner Oppel. We have the second by Vice Chair Commissioner Robinson.
So I've heard everyone's comments from Kensington Trails, and a lot of them are NIMBYs, not in my backyard, but some of them are legitimate concerns. And to rezone the 25.72 acre tract as RVs and potentially, I know the landowner, the applicant is here and he's saying that he wants 50 to 55, but we can't hold him to that. There's nothing that he can't, So then I have to think about, well, what's the worst case? And so if he were to develop the whole thing and he were to put, let's just say 10, at the very least, 10 RV spaces per acre, if he were able to get that density, be 250 RV spaces. I know that he doesn't plan on doing that, but I don't like rezoning the entire property. I feel like it's too much for that area. If it were more managed, smaller, where the RVs had more space to them. I've been to RV parks. I've camped. I've gone to them and paid to stay in places. I know what it's like. I've seen the 300,000 RVs next to mine. That's not as much. But I don't know that I can approve. I don't think I can recommend approval to the city council for the entire 25 acres. Although I think that the idea is nice, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Commissioner Robinson. Do we have, this is the discussion period on the motion. Commissioners, Commissioner Koch.
Right, but we can't do that, right? Howard, you just said that. It's all or nothing.
Right, correct.
Okay.
Let's vote.
Well, do we have any further discussion on the motion before I bring it to a vote?
One more thing. There's
Commissioner
only
Fenton.
one alternative that I see. I'm not sure it would change anybody's mind, but the alternative might be to move to postpone for a period of time so that this gentleman could perhaps pursue the ag exemption or pursue some way of legally subdividing, but then you couldn't come back to us that way.
He could
I'm
pull his
thinking out loud.
request.
He could pull his request
pull his
between now
Yeah, so I
and
think-
on to council.
I think if we
But-
voted on what it is directly in front of us, that's what we have to do.
Yeah. So any further discussion before I bring this to a vote from commissioners? Commissioner Oppel.
I'm going to follow my sword here again and apologize if I offended anybody here in the audience. That was not my intention, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Commissioner Oppel. Any further discussion before I bring this to a vote?
One more thing.
Commissioner Fenety.
When I vote, I'm not voting based on not in my own backyard, because I don't like that at all. I'm trying to vote, I will be voting based on what I think is good planning policy, not because somebody said not in my backyard.
Thank you, Commissioner Fenety. We do have to look at things as a whole, comprehensive planning. You know, great point, Commissioner Fenety, but let's, if there's no further discussion, let's, no, sir. No, if there's no further discussion, I'm going to bring this to a roll call vote.
Oppel,
Aye.
Robinson,
Aye.
Blok,
Aye.
Ellison,
Aye.
Kay,
Aye.
Koch,
Nay.
Fenety.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-1 to recommend to council to not approve the zoning to RV. All right, once again, as we stated, as a recommendation to City Council will have the first hearing a week from today, is that correct? All right. Thank you. All right, I knew that would be brief. All right, folks, come on, you gotta lighten up a little bit. Jeez. All right.